Hello everyone, welcome back. Today I'm gonna talk about something that was very highly requested and almost hard for me to put together, and that is the pros and cons of working with K-pop or in the K-pop industry. I want to just throw it out there. By no means am I describing anyone else's experiences. This is just solely off of the 7 years that I was working in the industry, kind of on and off, but altogether it was through a time span of 7 years. And it's all things that I personally experienced. I cannot say another person in the industry experienced any of these or had any better or worse experiences. So please just keep that in mind. This is all just me, just what I experienced and what I personally consider is a pro or a con. So I feel like this video is going to be very, very long because I just have so much to talk about. So I'll probably split it in half. I'm not sure if this is split in half, then the other one will be coming out soon too. But I want to start off with the cons of working in the K-pop industry so that at the end I can kind of end it on a brighter note. So I wrote down the list really quick. It's really bad. I don't want to show you my handwriting because I kind of scribbled it. But yeah, okay. The first thing that I consider to be probably one of the biggest cons is our crazy work schedule. I personally was on salary, which means every month I was paid a set amount of money, and it didn't matter how many tours or events were in that month. That's just what I would make in a month span. So I got paid twice a month, once in the beginning of the month and once in the middle of the month. And sometimes pay was late, it was early. It kind of depended on how crazy things were and like what our schedule was on tour. So I just want to share, I wrote down a specific example of how crazy our schedules can be. So I have it on my trusty old laptop. So this is for last year in 2019. I want to put it out there, it was probably the worst schedule I've ever had, ever. So don't expect it to be like this all the time, but there will be instances like this where it just gets completely insane. I don't want to give out too much information because then you guys will know which tours I was on and where I was. But, okay, so first of all, on April 8th, this is all 2019, April 8th, I went to LA to start tour number 1. And this tour, I don't know if I'm allowed to say who I went with. But I went with a really big group, and you guys can probably figure out who it is. We stayed in LA for about 3 weeks because they had a concert in LA, and then the week after they performed for a festival, an outdoor music festival that's huge in Southern California. Like everyone goes there and like everyone performs, all the big stars perform there. So I went there the next week, and then the week after was in LA. So starting April 8th, I was staying in LA in a hotel room, and that's when kind of everyday work was starting. And then, I took a bus to the other festival the next weekend with other staff, prepared for that, and then after the performance, we came back to LA and then prepared for that again. And this whole time I'm staying in LA or in the other event city, and I was working on there. And then this was all up until April 23rd. April 23rd, I took a flight to the other side of America, and then over there we did prep, and then we did the concert, and then like cleanup, and then 2 days later, so April 23rd, I flew to the east side of America. April 25th, I then took another flight up to Canada. Oh, I don't know if I'm allowed to say. Okay, well, I went to Canada, and then we did a concert there. the same thing, prep, concert, break it apart. And then 3 days later, April 28th, I flew to LA. So this tour number 1, it wasn't over, but it overlapped with another tour we had, or another event that we had planned. So April 28th, I left the first tour while almost all of my coworkers were still on the first tour. I went with, I want to say, like 1 or 2 others to start this new event. And this new event happened in Las Vegas. So I flew to LA for event 2, and then I took a car. So someone drove me to Las Vegas, and then we did an event there. And then May 2nd was the last day of event 2. So then I was driven back to LA, and then I don't remember if someone picked me up or how I went home. I probably Ubered, but I went back home. I rested for 3 days. So pretty much all of April I was gone. And then April 2nd I finally got to go home. May 2nd I finally got to go home. May 5th I started tour number 2 in New York. So then I flew. This is a completely new tour that has nothing to do with the first one or the event of the second one. And so this second tour, I flew to New York, and then I started that tour. And then I'm just going to speed through. May 11th, I took another flight to a different state. May 13th, I took another flight to another state. May 16th was another flight. May 18th was another flight. And I just want to put it out there, the May 18th flight was the hardest because May 16th we flew to a city, and then we did a concert. And then the next day, and then like the day after that, we flew to another concert. But this May 18th day was so tiring because May 18th we landed, we prepped everything, and then May 19th was actually the day of the concert. But right after the concert ended, we had to rush to the airport that night to take another flight to the other side of the country. So that was pretty insane. We literally just kind of had everything already packed the moment the concert ended. We just flew out. And then of course there was a group of workers who stayed behind to clean up and stuff, but the artist and some staff, including myself, we just booked it right after the concert, went straight to the next city. And then I did not write when. Oh, okay, so May 19th we went and we flew back. So we actually ended up flying back to LA, and they had a concert there, and then they also had like some promotions going on, like they were filming, doing some interviews. And then I stayed with them. I kind of helped them out in LA too, but then that also overlapped with tour number 3. And so tour number 3, I had to leave tour number 2 early, and I missed an overlapping schedule to go to tour number 3 on May 31st, and this is on the other side of the world. So this was in a continent I have never been before. I was excited to go, but it was really exhausting because it was overlapping again. So May 31st, I went over to a different continent, and then June 6th, I flew to another city in that continent. I don't really know how to explain. That kind of sounds weird, but it was another city. It was on the other side. Okay, so what? Okay, we went to Australia, if that makes any sense, which is why I'm not saying we went to another country, but we went to the other side of Australia, and we had to take a flight for that. And that was on June 6th. And then June 10th, I took a flight home. And then 4 days later, so like this is my first time at home after over a month. 4 days later, I get into a big car accident. It was a 4-car collision, and I happened to be in the car that took the greatest impact. So I was hit from behind, and then my car hit the car in front of us, and then that car hit the car in front. So there was 4 cars, and I was like the one with the major impact. So that happened. I ended up having to go to chiropractor. I got checked out by the doctor. I went through like a whole lawsuit kind of thing, and I was like barely able to turn my neck back and forth. Instead of like turning like this, I would have to like move my whole body. And then walking, I was walking with a limp because I smashed my knees onto the dashboard in front. So I had about like 2 weeks at home that I was finally gonna rest, but then I happened to get into that car accident, so I wasn't really resting. I was going to the chiropractor every other day and just resting at home and kind of trying to catch up on all my sleep. And then June 25th, I flew out to Europe to start tour number 4. And then June 30th, we flew to a different country. April 4th, I flew to another country. And then at that country, a couple of my coworkers flew back to New York to do another overlapping event, but I stayed back in Europe. And then July 7th, I flew to another country. July 11th was another country. And then July 17th, I finally got to fly back home. So within April, May, June, July, within the 4 months, I was flying nonstop. I think if you combine all the days I was at home within those 4 months, it was only at most like 3 weeks. If not, maybe not even 3 weeks. But considering for 4 months to only be home for a combined amount of 3 weeks, and then to have to go through a car accident during those weeks I was home, it was just exhausting. And I just want to say, like, I don't blame anyone for this schedule, but I think on a person that was just too much. I actually was supposed to go on another tour after that within like days of returning back to my home in July, but then I was just wiped out, so I didn't end up going because I like it would have only been like 3 days at home and then going on the next tour again, which honestly is insane to me. I was like physically could not handle it and mentally I could not do it either. It just terrible. But I don't regret it because I got to fly to a lot of different places, had some experiences. But I would say that is just a huge con of working in this industry. And that leads me to con number 2. So along with having a crazy work schedule in terms of dates, it was also very crazy in terms of how many hours are worked in a day. So let's say I personally think the hardest job I've ever had to do was being the backstage manager. And what that entails is kind of like, basically I would be in charge of anything. I don't want to say in charge, but I would oversee all the backstage operations. So this includes like all the dressing rooms, anything that happens at the venue with like the outside, the audience areas, just anything related to the venue, I would be usually the main contact for. And so the thing is, like, you never just have one job working in this industry. It's not like I can't just say, oh, I'm the backstage manager, so I'm not going to help out anywhere else. It's like, I'm the backstage manager, but I'm also going to help with artist hospitality, and I'm going to be the person who goes to the airport in advance to like wait and then bring everyone in, help everyone check in their bags, check in all the artists, and then fly out with them and then go back. Like, it was just, you always had to carry multiple jobs and do multiple things, and you kind of had to be there for other coworkers too, because honestly we were very understaffed. So we were kind of forced to do what I feel like should have been like at least 20 people's worth of work between like 5 or 6 people. So like in a day for a backstage manager, let's just say a lot of the times we don't, unless you're like a much bigger scaled event, we don't have much time to set up the venue, or yeah, so like we didn't have much time to set up the venue. So how it would work is like, even if we did, even if it was a larger scaled event, there would be that many more rooms to set up and that much more supplies in each room. So basically what I would do is like, I would wake up at like probably like 5 or 6 a.m. and then I'd get ready, wash up, get ready, and then I'd go over to the venue and I would start getting the contact information of the venue manager. And then I usually had a lot of part-time workers working under me. And so they were like the manpower, and I was more of the brain, I would say. So like I would be in contact with the artist management company, so like the artist label and the people who manage them. And then they would give me a plan in advance of like what kind of supplies they want in each room, what rooms need to be for which people, and like how things need to be set up. So I would oversee that, and a lot of the times I would also be setting it up myself because there's just not enough people. So I would do that from like the moment the venue opens, which is usually, I want to say, around like 6:30 a.m. at the latest. That's like when load-in happens, and like that's when production people are unloading all their equipment. And so that's like usually the time I would go to. I'd start setting things up. It was like to the point where, let's say if they wanted soda in their fridge, all the labels have to be facing the same way. I don't know if this is a real rule, but this is just what I've always been doing, and I've been praised for doing, so I never stopped doing it. But like bags of chips, you know, like straighten out as many wrinkles as you can, put it out nicely. Like I always wanted it to look like hotel status because it's for the artists and it's for people that I'm trying to manage and care for. So I wanted to give them my best. So I would do that all day long, set up all these dressing rooms. Mind you, I wish I could show you the list of what's on the rider, but like there is just nonstop requests. And every artist is different. They request for different things, but anything from like how many bags of chips to what kind of sodas to like some people have requested for like certain kind of seaweed or ramen, things like that. It gets very specific. So I'd be running around trying to set up dressing rooms. I'm also the person who has to make and print dressing room signs. Pretty much from the moment you get off in the loading dock, which is like where all the trailers and stuff go. That's also where we get dropped off and the artists get dropped off, like the backstage area. From the moment they get off, there has to be enough signs where they can see and they will not have any problem going to their dressing rooms by reading the signs. So I would like put up signs probably every like 10 feet with giant arrows, like artist, giant arrow pointing this way, catering, giant arrow pointing this way. Oh, which reminds me, I'm also in charge of catering, so like setting all that stuff up too. And then the concert will happen. I also like make a quick change booth, and then I also break that apart. So then the concert would happen and the concert ends. So I'm at this venue from like 6 in the morning until the concert's ending. And as much as it may sound like I have plenty of time, you have to realize to set up backstage, you have to realize like these people are also, the artists have to do rehearsals and stuff. So I have to finish setting up all the rooms I have to finish setting them up before the artists get there. And they usually kind of got there around that like 1 p.m.-ish to get ready and do rehearsals and then do makeup and stuff. So that's like 6 a.m. to like kind of around 1 p.m. I'd have to set up all these rooms. And it really was hard. I'm like running around. My poor part-timers who are with me, thank you if you ever worked for me. But like we're always running around and I'm like going crazy because the tour managers from Korea are also contacting me and saying like they need this, they need that. And then I'm trying to tell the people working with me to help me out and like do this and do that, and I'm trying to run around too, and like I always have to be available for the Korean staff, but then I also have to be directing the local staff, so I'm just like, it's a lot of stress. And then concert happens. When concert does happen, I have more relaxing time. It's like everything's done, so I kind of just sit. Usually I'm so exhausted, so I'll just sit in like a tiny room in the backstage area that I have for myself and like my company people, and I would sometimes just take a nap or just sit and staring at a blank wall because I'm just overwhelmed. And then around like 2, usually the second to last song, I'll like follow the set list. Usually on the second to last song, I will then gather up my local part-timers, and then we would start breaking apart the quick change room, so taking out all the supplies and then packing everything. So we're like pulling everything out that we can save. Any trash and stuff we just kind of leave, but then any furnitures or extra things I can pack and take to the next city, I will. So then I'm like packing, and then the artists go back to their dressing rooms, and then artists are the first ones out. Usually they don't do much except kind of gather their belongings, and then they're out of the venue. So then the moment people start leaving their rooms is when me and my staff go into each room, and then we pack up whatever we can. But it's like extension cables, like the power strips, fans, we're like breaking apart fans or full body mirrors, and like any little thing that we can save, we will save. And so we like pack it up, we pack it into boxes. This usually lasts until like 2 a.m. ish. Usually we end around 2 a.m. We're like packing, like taping up boxes, throwing them on the trailers, because there's usually like a tour trailer that carries all the stage equipment, and like they drive to the other cities. So we would throw it on there, and then like I would very, 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 very tiredly go home. I mean, not home, go back to the hotel, and then I'd have to wake up hours later to get on a flight, or usually it was to get on another flight, because we usually fly out the day after a concert. So time, extremely long hours. I know there was one event where I averaged 20 hours of working time in a day, which to me is pretty ridiculous, but there's no other choice. Like, there's nothing else we can do about it. So it's kind of inevitable, but it is very exhausting. Number 3, a con is I have no say as to where I'm going or what events I'm working at. I feel like this would go with a lot of companies not in the entertainment industry, just in general, but I think it's a little different for us because of how much work goes into every event and how much time. So like my examples from earlier, when I was flying out, I had no say. My boss would just tell me to go, and that's where I have to go. They can give me very last minute information, and I just have to listen and go. And that's just how the culture kind of is. It's like mutually understood that that's how it's gonna be. There were times where like I got pulled out of a tour like 2 days before my flight, or there are times where like last minute they're like, you need to go to this city, so start packing. So I'm just like, okay, and I just start packing. So like it's hard for a personal life. There's really not too much time for a personal life, and even if there is, just plans are constantly getting canceled because of how last minute a lot of these things can be, a lot of meetings and stuff. So yeah.